Does extraterrestrial life exist on other worlds, and what does it look like, is one of the oldest questions asked by mankind, with very few satisfying answers. But I believe there's another way we can imagine what life may look like on other worlds, based on the concept of convergent evolution. Take this fern and this big wonderful tree behind me. This fern and that tree share similar physical features with each other. The way they branch out, the way that they are physically appearing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their ancestor shared those same physical features. Why is this important? Well, it's important because it suggests that organisms evolve more so on the influence of their environment, not necessarily what they're related to. Most people who may not be familiar with Charles Darwin's idea of natural selection may think that the purpose of evolution is that for the organism is trying to reach a specific point. Like it has a goal. It's evolving to get there. It's evolving on purpose. But it's more so an accident. Evolution and natural selection is more of an accident from mutations and trial and error. It's like it's failing more times than it is succeeding. One of the most empowering and awing facts I learnt about evolution, or in science in general, was about natural selection and how it really happens at all. There are seemingly uncountable possibilities for how an organism could evolve. But if it has qualities, or what scientists call phenotypes, that cause problems for the organism's existence, then it doesn't exist. Otherwise, it will continue to exist, and it will need to possess phenotypes that benefit its ongoing existence to have babies. Yes, it really is down to and all about that replication. But it's not necessarily about that, if you know what I mean. It's simply about continuism. Having babies and replication is really just a filter preventing any possible organism from existing. I believe that there are more organisms possible, more different kinds of organisms possible than the number of atoms in the universe. It's just that they can't really practically exist and emerge without the properties of replication. There are conflicting definitions of convergent evolution and different ways to recognise and quantify convergence. Unfortunately, researchers have not very thoroughly agreed on the true definition of convergent evolution. Throughout history, it has been recognised intuitively. For example, some bacteria swim with flagellum and some animals swim with tails. Intuitively, we know these things are similar in structure and serve a similar purpose and function: to move around. But it's possible that fish and bacteria don't share an ancestor that had a tail or flagellum, but this has never been confirmed. Not all researchers have agreed on the true definition of convergent evolution. Some researchers define it based on the physical appearance of an organism. Some researchers define it based on the relative adaptive peaks or large-scale determinism throughout the universe. It's a really fascinating concept. There are two other types of evolution related to convergent evolution. Divergent evolution, where two species that appear similar in character in time begins to follow a unique evolutionary pathway to the other, whereby if they were compared later in the future, would look somewhat distinct. And parallel evolution is where two species follow the same evolutionary pathway in time, each looking different from their own ancestors, but still looking like they're unrelated species. Convergent evolution is arguably similar to parallel evolution. Well, this is one definition that researchers can agree on, by the way. When two different species evolve independently from each other and form analogous structures, they have similar form and function, but these features were not present in their last common ancestor. This is also called a concestor. This means that two organisms that look similar, and in some cases almost the same as each other, looked nothing like their ancestors. For example, the ancestors of birds, the theropod dinosaurs, and the unconfirmed ancestor of bats, small insect-eating mammals, were nothing like each other in physical appearance. Although we are certain that bats evolved from mammals, we can be certain they didn't look like birds at all. The birds and bats can be distinguishable pretty easily, but they have a similar wing structure. influenced by the same or a similar environment. This phenomenon is possible during crown evolution, where the species have been separated by oceans on new continents and so are forced down a different evolutionary path. If the environmental conditions remain the same for two continents, then convergent evolution is possible. At least, it will be more likely. Convergent evolution is probably possible even given different environments, but not as likely as if the environment stays the same. Convergence also occurs at the molecular level, where proteins are formed by amino acids, and the same proteins are made from differing species, an example of convergence emerging at the molecular level. There are countless examples of convergent evolution in nature, many of which are obvious. A lot of organisms in nature have specialised adaptations for their environment, and it's not the organism's choice to evolve in this way. I like to call evolution the perfect problem solver. And in convergent evolution, I like to say that the problem has been solved more than once with the same solution, but independently from one other species. Let's say a bunch of people, 20 people or so, were given a math problem. And some may get it wrong, some may get it right. But I believe the most popular answer, the mode of the set of answers given, will be most likely the correct answer. And there may have been more than one way to get that answer, but in the end, the answer will be the same. There will be the best answer. Now, I know what you're saying, but aren't there multiple ways an organism could evolve in its environment and benefit just as much as other organisms that are living there? Hence, genetic diversity that we see within our environment every day. Yes, it's true, but that doesn't mean that that all organisms are equally benefiting from their environment as other organisms. So, in the end, it's possible that the organisms that are dominating are the ones with the best solutions. Now, there is still an assumption we have to make about how life would begin on other planets. And that assumption is that it began the same way as we know it, because we can't assume anything else. We have a data set of 1, and that's why. This is difficult, because in biology there is a lot of speculation. Unlike physics, where there is a clean theory, biology cannot simply state something exists just because it is mathematically possible. There is also the popular belief that all living organisms on Earth must share a single last universal ancestor. So who knows if there are other ways life could have started, and if it makes a difference in the constraints for how a species will evolve. Now, the importance of convergent evolution in speculating what life on other planets may look like, we first assume it is ubiquitous in nature. Comparative biologists use convergent evolution as powerful statistical tests, for if a biologist can show that the same ecomorphological patterns have shown up independently and are fit for survival in the same environmental conditions, then this will give the comparative biologist credibility for predicting how an organism will look given the environment. Now, there have been some interesting experiments proposed that may help us better understand how organisms can adapt to harsh environments, such as experiments involving long-term space travel or organisms being introduced to other planets. I'm not suggesting we donate our saliva to NASA, but I think this is important because some of the short-term experiments that we can do here on Earth, there are limits to that, and these long-term experiments may produce some unexpected results and better help us understand how these organisms evolve. Astrobiologists use analog environments, AEs. They are used to study adaptation in extreme environments, including environments found on other planets, from cold and dry conditions to scolding temperatures found in Atacama Desert. Observations support that the organisms that live in similar environments but at different locations share the most similarities. We have data in the case of two separate species evolving in the same environmental conditions but at different times in history. For example, the common dolphin and the long-extinct ichthyosaur are prime examples of adaptation for fast, efficient swimming. The ichthyosaur is thought to have gone extinct 90 million years ago. the dolphins split off from the Indo-Hyas roughly 48 million years ago. So the ichthyosaurs were dolphin-like creatures, when today's dolphins' ancestors were cervatin-like deer creatures running around on the beach. The ichthyosaur looked similar in appearance to the common dolphin, possessing similar upper forelimb bones, elbow and pectoral fin structures. These creatures are remarkably similar to each other: size, shape, bone structures and anatomy. Geologically speaking, the climate would have been relatively stable from when the ichthyosaur went extinct to when the dolphin emerged, supporting the theory that the climate has significant influence on how a species will evolve and look. So, if life does in fact exist out there somewhere in the universe on other planets, then considering this principle, we can make predictions of what it looks like, and it may be the case that life may be more similar to life on Earth than we think. Anyway, thanks for making it to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. I'm going to share a snippet of a very frustrating moment I had whilst recording some of these videos and some of these narrations. Anyway, thank you for watching. Does extraterrestrial life exist on other planets, and what does it look like, is one of the oldest questions asked by mankind, with few satisfying answers. But